Hello, everybody. Well, I'm just going to say from the very beginning, I am so unbelievably excited to be stood here and about to run this session. On a personal level, many of you will know that I am a carer to my daughter with Down syndrome, and at the very point that she entered my life, I had just had a whole new perspective about what it's been like from that side of our sort of services that we run in imaging and also across many other health services in the NHS. And it's changed the way I teach and the way I look upon things, and I've really started to kind of integrate and try and share my opinions and give over my voice to improve that for lots of other folk as well. So this morning is not about me. It's about inviting that patient voice and providing that opportunity for you to listen and ask lots of questions and to make the best of this opportunity. So we're going to do it in two separate sections. The first, I'm going to start off with inviting Chris Lewis to the stage. And then the second stage will be a panel fireside discussion. I need a fire, please. And we'll open that discussion with Professor Heidi Probst and Dr. Rachel Harris as well as being joined by Chris Lewis. So anyway, just to move things forward, I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris was a self-employed business consultant for many years until being diagnosed in 2007 with a stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma with a 6-month prognosis. He received a donor stem cell transplant but was unable to work regularly afterwards due to frequent bouts of differing GVHD. He decided to spend the rest of his life empowering people going through what he had also experienced. Chris is now one of the most influential cancer patients in the world. Having seen many challenges for people living with cancer, Chris works with numerous global organisations to aid better collaboration in this sector. He runs his own very successful website, which you will have a sneak preview of sections of it in the PowerPoint, and also runs an innovative charity as well. You can find the links there within that as well. This enables people in the UK affected by cancer, long-term health issues, poverty to stay digitally connected for free. Successful collaboration is key to this work, and Chris is a frequent keynote speaker and writer across the world. And you can also connect with him on Twitter. So I'd like to invite Chris Lewis to the stage. Thank you.
There we go. There's the disclosure. So, I would like to thank the President and his team for inviting me to share my experiences with you today. Working in collaboration is something I've always done in my business life, and I have continued that theme successfully since being enrolled into the world of cancer in 2007. Today you will hear how cancer has affected me personally and the many things that I experienced, the disappointing things I encountered, and some opinions of what we should be doing better. Can I also declare that this presentation is an AI-free zone, so if you see any mistakes, you'll know. When I was approached about doing this talk, my first question was, what is the subject? When I was told, I was absolutely delighted, as it is a true passion of mine. You can't buy lived experience, and I've been absolutely shocked how much it is neglected by professionals who should know better. Many people treated for cancer or any other life-changing conditions really want to share their experiences in a positive way, as they are generally grateful to the incredible clinicians who are working to help them. At that stage, there is so much goodwill that can be harvested, however, isn't. But other than a few pockets in the service, most is still only used for box ticking. Patient involvement doesn't always mean patient engagement. We are asked to contribute to surveys and discussions, rarely hearing any outcome, mostly during staff working hours, with little, if any, reward offered for our time and experience, not to receive financial gain, but as a token of how much our input is valued. From a clinical point, these are some of the things that I would like our professionals to understand. There are two key times when lived experience is important. The first one is on diagnosis. Every patient is a human being and has their own story and life to lead and should be treated as such. Survival in its own might seem good for some, but we should now be in the times of thriving with cancer. It's important to understand that the patient is the expert in their own health, so there are really two professionals in the room. Nothing about me without me is something I use with my own clinicians, which has worked well for 16 years. Remember, being diagnosed with cancer changes your life forever. One important thing to note is that once you diagnose a patient, their life has changed forever. Be it complex or simple, tiger or pussycat, your patient will never forget that moment. Inevitably, they will be struck with fear. Some may never get over it psychologically, even if they manage to physically. There may be months or years of treatment and uncertainty, possibly loss of income or career. Also other life complications depending on your age. Will you ever escape the dark shadow of cancer hanging over you and your family? In the next minutes, I will talk about how my own life changed and some of the incredible highs and lows that came my way. Of course, that's not me, but it could be. This is how I was feeling at work, on top of the world and unstoppable. I'm sure many of you feel like that today. I had everything a man could want: a wonderful wife, 2 talented sons making their way in life. Business was great and my phone was constantly busy. I really did feel untouchable. I'd built from scratch a multi-million-pound business and at the age of 51 was looking forward to a comfortable retirement. Then came a bad few months for my health, ending up with an emergency visit to hospital when I had my tonsils removed. A few weeks later, my wife and I were being told that if things didn't go well, I might only make 6 months. So my immediate challenges: I'd been diagnosed with mantle cell lymphoma stage 4, incurable. My only chance was aggressive chemotherapy and an unrelated stem cell transplant donor, if one could be found. Look how quickly life can turn. From a very happy and successful businessman to a fragile and vulnerable human being. How was I going to provide for my family? My wife had just retired and our plans included more global travel. But it seems what man proposes, God disposes. Nothing could change my situation, so I just had to learn how to deal with it. There certainly is no handbook that you can read to prepare for something like this. I'm a man who loves data and statistics. It was obvious that at most stages my chances were slim. But I did ask the doctor doing my transplant what were my odds. He said they hadn't used this treatment frequently enough in recent years to know. So I really was heading into unknown territory on a wing and a prayer. We often talk about information giving, how much and when. But I know for me at that stage, enough was enough. I had to deal with each step thoroughly. I started to approach my situation as I would any complex business issue. It was how I knew best. An early death was something I'd never considered. All my life I'd been blessed with incredibly good health, which I guess I took for granted. Even if I was lucky enough to make it through the treatment, how were we going to afford our bills? We still had a mortgage, 2 flashy cars, and everything else that goes with that lifestyle. I'd never known any other way of life than working since I was young. My wife asked me if I was going to die soon, why was I worried about the bills? I can't explain how difficult it was to really understand what was happening to me. It felt like a bad dream then, and it still does now. I can't believe how much of my life has changed. Strangely enough, it was my financial situation that made me feel more vulnerable than the cancer. Apart from my time at school, everything I touched during my life had turned to gold. I'd achieved everything I wanted to at that point. A big part of me said, why should cancer stop that run? But the other part said, actually, get real, boy. Life after cancer, and that's not me either. Immediately after my diagnosis and full body scan to discover where all the tumours were, much of my time was spent at hospital. 6 sessions of extremely aggressive chemotherapy got me incredibly into remission. Then there was the issue of finding me a matched, unrelated donor. Luckily, one was found in London, incredibly, from Anthony Nolan, the wonderful charity. So the serious waiting began until everything was confirmed. I managed to continue working during my chemo, as my cancer had turned into my biggest psychological challenge yet. I wanted to show that it couldn't bring me down. Finally, everything was in place for my transplant. I'm a great believer in karma and things happening for a reason. And there was no greater sign for me than receiving the chance of a new life at Christmas. A minimum of 6 weeks to spend in an isolation unit was a time for a major life reflection. I received 10 days of aggressive chemotherapy to kill off my immune system, and then day 0 arrived. My life-saving cells had come across London on a motorbike, and I was hooked up to them, watching as this little bag dripped into my arm. I wasn't worried about the physical issues of treatment, but the psychological impact of being in my own company for so long. I can't describe how vulnerable I felt, not knowing if I was going to live or die at any stage. Calling the nurses every time I need showering or go to the loo. All my waste was being measured and analysed. What value did I have to anyone now? Who would want me if I finished treatment anyway? My appearance was changing in front of my eyes with steroids. Would I even find myself attractive, let alone what my wife might think? What work could I do if I survived? Certainly not what I was currently doing. I had no qualifications and hadn't done a job interview since I was a young boy. What was I good at, if anyone asked me? I could only produce one thing. I was a good talker. How on earth had I made a living out of that? I couldn't have felt any lower. I felt I was really in a real-life game of snakes and ladders, having spent my life dodging the snakes and climbing the ladders. I got to square 99 and hit the biggest snake of all, taking me right back to the beginning. So having survived each challenging stage since my diagnosis, it became clear that the things in life I never thought would be problems suddenly were, all together. It was physically impossible for me to work as I never was well long enough, and I had to decide about my finances. This proved difficult, particularly if you ever mention you have cancer, which I learned early on not to. I had now entered a second phase of life where I had to learn to live again. Rather like going back to primary school, but as an adult. As a confident businessman, I was used to destroying all obstacles to my progress. But newly found disability left me to knock on doors like Oliver Twist, asking for help. It took me a long time fighting with my mind to accept small wins instead of big ones. Living with cancer felt like trying to have a life with one arm tied behind my back. Everything was such an effort, with society making it difficult every step of the way. The biggest challenge that I found was psychological, an area that is very understated with a cancer diagnosis. In many cases, this can be worse than the physical impact. Will I ever feel useful again? I had become just another statistic on the rising list of people with cancer. People started to feel sorry for me and not knowing who I was in my previous world. Just another person in an NHS gown with my backside hanging out. We could be lords, ladies, bin men or scientists. In this environment, we're all the same. There is no finer equaliser than bad health. Money and position make very little difference to your outcome. Sometimes we forget far too frequently. So my life was now dominated by hospital visits. I had morphed into a professional patient, spending increasingly greater time in the NHS. I couldn't help but look around at systems and talk to other patients. I found very little practical support, nothing about work, finances or relationships, all the things you really need help for. All charities were offering were booklets and a cup of tea. It seemed that once you were diagnosed with cancer, society had no further use for you unless you were raising funds. This felt crazy from two perspectives: the social and financial aspects of the country's economy. Sure, many would require complex treatment, and many may not be able to go back to their previous roles, but were not totally useless. I expected an arm round my shoulder when I left hospital, but all I found was unmentioned discrimination across society. Lenders wanting their money back as soon as you mention cancer. Employers not interested in you. Insurance companies treating you like a cash cow. Many charities putting you on their database for targeted ads and fundraising asks. Even pointing you towards making free wills for their legacy team. Why do we treat vulnerable people in this way? And unfortunately, it's not only cancer that is like this. I had to know if I was the only one who saw it that way. How was I going to do that apart from word of mouth? My friends suggested using social media and a website, but I had done nothing like that in my life. At that stage, I was still a telephone man, so yet another plan was required. Next steps. Very kindly, my friends started a website for me and signed me up to various social media accounts. Once I got used to the idea, it was great fun. Even though my health was erratic, I could communicate across the world from my home. I quickly established that the internet was a great equaliser for patients. It could amplify our voices, and soon very informative communities were created, becoming such wonderful resources for many, even more so today. My big concern initially was who will be listening to me, and I didn't have any followers. But incredibly, I won UK Health Blogger of the Year in my first year, and things took off from there. A marketing company donated some time to me, and I learned all about creating and maintaining a brand. It was crucial for me to reflect my personality through Chris's Cancer Community. That name came to me in about 30 seconds. And the rest, as they say, is history. Invitations quickly followed to write guest pieces or speak nationally, starting small but growing larger quickly. Even I had no followers at the start of this crazy journey. The subject of healthcare on social media can be rather like the Wild West. So much content from across the world, varying standards, with some just all about selling products and services, good or bad, particularly in cancer. When you're new in the space, it can be hard to find people to trust. I knew I had to work very hard to be one of those people, or nobody would listen to me. This is all about relationship building, and I had done that throughout my business career. But it takes time. However, done properly, I knew it would serve me well for the future. I feel it took roughly 5 years, before I became a go-to person, a brand leader. The international invites started coming, resulting in a career high speaking at the Global Cancer Conference in Kuala Lumpur. I've met many famous people and talked in some wonderful venues and have been on TV numerous times. Here are just a few of the people who have come into my life since cancer. So much has happened to me in a relatively small space of time. I have to keep pictures on my site as my memory starts to fade. What you are seeing here today are only a few of the wonderful people I've met and continue to meet down the years. The great irony is that none of this would have happened if I hadn't got cancer. I've been invited to speak at many conferences around the globe, including Liverpool, of course. Also sat with some of the most brilliant clinicians in the cancer world. Daily, I speak to incredible people, health professionals and patients. I really do have the best job in the world. What I'm most proud of is that my story is all over the internet and is serving as a beacon of hope for many with stage 4 cancer. Probably my most incredible experience so far is being invited to spend some time in Palestine and Jerusalem, sharing my message of hope. I did lectures at Hebron's largest hospital and the university, making some incredible friends along the way. Also doing a talk in Jerusalem Old Town. Amongst the wonderful people I've been lucky enough to meet is Deborah James. A long time before she was proclaimed a dame, we were doing very similar work and met regularly at different functions. One very special lady who always oozed fun, even when she was going through such awful times. Do you remember when I mentioned earlier how life-changing a cancer diagnosis can be? Not many have changed as dramatically as mine, but as you can imagine, their lives are very different nevertheless. So since 2007, I've had 2 transplants and 4 different versions of GVHD, affecting most of my major organs. My hips are now crumbling because of so much steroidal treatment. This disease is affecting us all. Every family in the country will have somebody directly impacted. Approximately 30 million people in this country will get it in their lifetime. My father died of bowel cancer. My mother was impacted. Her life was changed totally by breast cancer. Society is being changed by cancer, not just in the UK, but globally, of course. I always said that experience has no value unless it's shared. That very much includes bad ones. My business life was always that way. Never afraid to make a mistake because that's really the way we learn. Whether we like it or not, healthcare is a business, and so is the NHS. Unless it is run like one, it will inevitably fail, which it is now. After many years of running on empty and the wonderful goodwill of all the members of staff. Whenever gigantic failure in any industry is mentioned, so is we need more investment. But if the foundations are unstable, pouring more money in will just delay the inevitable. Money is just one important part of the business. So here are some of the observations that I'd like to make with you. I've never experienced anything like the cancer sector in my life. It is totally the reverse of a well-run business. So little openness and no appetite to engage with its own staff, let alone its customers. That is us all, the service users. All parts are so splintered and disjointed. There is so little effective collaboration, and each party has their own agenda. Ultimately, Big Pharma is calling the tune with everyone dancing to it. Of course, I, like most other people in this country, are grateful for the incredible work being done by the wonderfully dedicated staff. But this alone is no longer good enough to progress the service, to service the nation adequately in future years. In honesty, we're running on fumes. Our largest provider, the NHS, has suffered from weak leadership for many years, becoming just puppets of the government instead of standing up for what is needed. Outdated working practices were allowed to continue and create a culture of fear. Anyone speaking out referred to as a whistleblower. In many cases of management failure, it is rewarded with promotion or a sideways step. The system makes it too difficult to remove underperforming individuals. My biggest criticisms are a lack of future vision, not embracing technology and new ways of communication. The world, as we all know it, has changed dramatically with technology. I talk to some professionals that view GP video calls as great progress. We are so far behind many countries in this regard. It is embarrassing. Lack of collaboration is also a major issue. None of us are great at everything, and we all need to work with others who have a different expertise. The NHS seems to have a suspicion of anybody from outside the service, creating a real lack of skills on recruitment, insisting on using the same pools for employment. One example, staff moved from cancer charities to the NHS. They moved back from the NHS to cancer charities. We talk all about diversity, but we don't see a skill diversity. We talk about colour, sex and everything else. Far more outside staff are required to create innovation. Do we really want to solve the cancer crisis? I have to ask that myself. I ask that daily. Do we really want to solve it? Because I can't find too many movers that do. Can any system be changed? There must be the will. Is everybody happy with the status quo? It looks to me like that. Words are cheap and without action are useless. Nobody wants to break the current failing system. Society is still not accepting the impacts of cancer. Big Pharma dominates cancer patients and healthcare providers. How is this right financially and ethically? With 50% of our nation impacted by cancer, we must change. The system is not fit for purpose. How does one cancer charity dominate research in this country? There's so little transparency. Are large cancer charities becoming irrelevant in 2023? Do we need them in the version that they are now? Inequalities in care are becoming bigger. We have the postcode lottery. Is the global issue of cancer too big, costly for politicians? There's no quick wins there, right? Are we getting a good return on time and financial investment into cancer? Are we really seeing the rewards for the effort and the finance that have been put into it over the years? Should we be investing more into prevention than cure? And one I'd really like to say, because everyone works hard, but actually working hard does not guarantee success. So, I thank you so much for your time and focus. As you can see, my life has changed so dramatically and with absolutely no notice whatsoever. I've had to deal with so many different things so quickly. I still wake up and feel like I'm nothing to do with the Chris before cancer. My business hat stays on wherever I am. From my diagnosis onwards, I've been looking at how things could be done better. Not just for me, but anybody following on. I'm used to success, and I see a system that has been failing for many years. Not due to any staff, but poor systems and working practices. Of course, you won't all agree with my observations, and I can't pretend to know all the answers. But hopefully, I've laid down a foundation for fruitful thoughts and constructive discussions. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.